Hey, tonight we're diving into the fascinating world of the Nubian Black Pharaohs, rulers who turned the tables on one of history's greatest empires. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the 8th century BCE, and you're not just anyone, you're P, soon to be the first Nubian pharaoh of Egypt's 25th dynasty. The morning sun filters through the window of your palace in Napata, casting long shadows across the sandstone floor. Outside, you can hear the gentle flowing of the Nile, life-giver to your kingdom of Kush. The good news is you're about to become one of history's most powerful rulers, commanding an empire that will stretch from deep in present-day Sudan all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. The bad news? Your day as a Nubian pharaoh will test every ounce of your diplomatic skill, military prowess, and divine connection to the gods. You swing your legs over the side of your bed, though bed might be too simple a word for the ornate sleeping platform you rest upon. It's carved from precious woods, inlaid with gold and ivory, and covered with the finest linens. The room around you is spacious and cool despite the growing heat outside. You've got to hand it to the ancient Nubians. They knew how to build. Thick walls keep the desert heat at bay, while cleverly positioned windows allow for refreshing breezes. A servant enters silently, head bowed. "Great one," he murmurs, "the day awaits your divine presence." You rise and stretch, feeling the weight of responsibility already pressing down upon your shoulders. Today is no ordinary day. Today you will finalize plans for your northern campaign, the historic push into Egypt that will forever change the relationship between these two ancient powers. Two attendants enter to begin your morning rituals. You might think being a pharaoh means lounging around, giving orders all day, but you're about to discover that every moment of your life is scripted with religious significance and royal protocols. First comes the purification. Water from the Nile, considered sacred, is brought in a golden basin. As it's poured over your hands, prayers are spoken to Amun-Ra, the great god your people have worshipped for generations. The Nubians have long revered Amun-Ra, the same deity the Egyptians worship at Karnak. This shared religion will be crucial in your coming conquest. You're not just invading Egypt, you see yourself as restoring proper worship and order to a land that has fallen into chaos. Next, your body is rubbed with oils and perfumes made from ingredients sourced from throughout Africa and beyond. Some of these scented oils come from as far away as Lebanon and Greece, testament to the extensive trade networks your kingdom maintains. The palace attendants work in silence, their hands practiced and efficient. The finest oils are reserved for you alone. One tiny vial might cost what a common farmer earns in a year. Then comes your clothing, and you'd better get used to the heavy regalia of kingship. A simple white kilt of the finest linen forms the base of your outfit. Over this goes a broad, colourful sash that wraps around your waist and hangs down in front. This isn't just any fabric, it's intricately decorated with patterns that signify your royal status. Gold sandals adorn your feet, and heavy gold collars, armbands and bracelets are placed on your body. Each piece of jewellery isn't simply decorative. They're powerful symbols, many bearing protective amulets and inscriptions to the gods. Finally, your attendants bring forth the crowns. Today, you'll wear the distinct double crown that symbolises your rule over both Upper and Lower Nubia. It's surprisingly heavy, and you must hold your head high and steady despite the weight, just one of the many physical demands of kingship. By the time you're fully dressed and adorned, the morning is well advanced. Your clothing alone may weigh an extra 15 pounds, and you'll wear it through the heat of the day. You'd better be physically strong to endure this, and that's before you even begin the actual work of ruling. "The council awaits, Great One," announces the chief steward, bowing deeply. You nod and move toward the great hall where your military commanders and advisors have gathered. Your walk is deliberate and measured. A pharaoh never hurries. Every movement you make is watched and interpreted. A rushed step might be seen as anxiety, a slouched shoulder as weakness. The pressure to appear divine and infallible is constant. The great hall falls silent as you enter. Stone columns soar overhead, their capitals carved to resemble the open papyrus plants that grow along the Nile. Light streams in from high windows, illuminating the vibrant paintings that adorn the walls, scenes of your ancestors communing with the gods, leading victories in battle and bringing prosperity to the land. Your advisors prostrate themselves as you take your seat on the throne. The throne itself is another work of art carved from ebony and overlaid with gold, its arms ending in lion heads, symbols of royal power and protection. "All rise," you command, your voice echoing through the chamber. The council meeting begins, and immediately you're plunged into complex discussions of military strategy, religious obligations, and diplomatic maneuvering. This is where you discover that being pharaoh isn't just about looking magnificent. It requires a keen intelligence and masterful understanding of politics. Your general Tefnakt approaches with a map drawn on papyrus. "Divine One," he begins, "our scouts report that Egypt remains divided. The local princes squabble amongst themselves. Their central authority has collapsed." He points to various locations on the map. Memphis, Thebes, Heracleopolis, all controlled by different factions. You nod thoughtfully. Egypt, once united and mighty, has fractured into competing power centers. The land to your north has entered what historians would later call its third intermediate period, a time of political fragmentation. For centuries, Egypt had been the dominant power, sometimes ruling over Nubian territories, but now the tables have turned. "And the temple of Amun at Karnak," you ask, referring to Egypt's most sacred site. "The priests grow concerned," replies your high priest. "They believe proper rituals are being neglected. They would welcome a strong ruler who respects the old ways. This is crucial information. You've been portraying yourself not as a foreign conqueror, but as a restorer of Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian concept of truth, balance, and cosmic order. Your invasion will be framed as a religious duty, bringing proper worship back to a land that has strayed from divine principles. As the meeting progresses, you learn that your army is nearly ready. The famous Nubian archers, the feared bowmen of Kush, whose skill is legendary throughout the ancient world, form the backbone of your forces. These warriors can hit targets at distances that seem impossible to other armies of the time. Your personal guard, composed of the most elite of these archers, stands at attention along the walls of the hall, but military might alone won't secure your place as pharaoh. You must also understand the complex religious rituals that legitimize royal power in both Nubia and Egypt. The Oracle of Amun at Jebel Barkal has spoken favourably of your campaign, the High Priest informs you. Jebel Barkal, that distinctive flat-topped mountain with its pinnacle that resembles a rearing cobra when viewed from the west. This site is sacred to both Nubians and Egyptians, believed to be the southern home of Amun-Ra himself. The temple at its base has been a holy site for centuries, and the blessing of its oracle is essential for your plans. When do we march north, you ask your generals. With the next full moon, Divine One, comes the reply. The river levels will be favourable for our ships. You nod your approval. The timing is auspicious. The campaign will begin soon. As the council meeting concludes, you're reminded of your next duty, a visit to the temple to make offerings to Amun-Ra. There's no rest for a pharaoh. Your day is a carefully choreographed sequence of religious ceremonies, administrative decisions, and public appearances. You rise from your throne, and once again your attendants fall in around you as you move toward the palace exit. Outside, the heat of the day hits you like a physical force. The temperature in this region can soar to over 120 degrees during the hottest parts of the year. Even now, well before midday, the air shimmers with heat above the stone pathways. Your people line the route to the temple, falling to their knees as you pass. To them, you are not just a king, you are a living god, the embodiment of divine power on earth. It's a heavy burden to bear. Every blessing in their lives, from the flooding of the Nile to the success of their crops, is believed to flow from your divine connection. And likewise, every hardship might be interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure. The procession makes its way through the city of Napata, your capital. It's a prosperous place, with well-built homes of mud brick for the ordinary citizens and grander stone structures for the nobility and temples. Markets buzz with activity as traders offer goods from throughout the known world. Gold from the mines of the eastern desert, ivory from the south, exotic woods, spices, and precious stones. You'd be proud of this city. Napata stands at a crucial crossroads of trade routes, allowing your kingdom to control commerce between Central Africa and Egypt. This strategic position has brought great wealth to your kingdom, wealth that now finances your armies and your monumental building projects. The Temple of Amun rises before you, its massive stone pylons towering over the surrounding buildings. Built in the Egyptian style, but with distinctive Nubian elements, it's a testament to the cultural connections between your people and those you plan to rule. Priests in white linen robes await your arrival, censers of smoking incense in their hands. The temple interior is cool and dim after the brightness outside. Light filters through small, high openings, creating dramatic beams that illuminate the sacred spaces. The scent of incense fills the air, and the soft murmur of prayers creates a hypnotic atmosphere. Here, in the inner sanctuary where only you and the highest priests may enter, stands the sacred bark of Amun, a model boat in which the god's spirit resides. You perform the rituals exactly as tradition demands, making offerings of food, wine, and precious items. The high priest intones prayers in both the Nubian language and Egyptian, another sign of the cultural duality of your kingdom. The ritual is lengthy and physically demanding, standing in the same position for long periods, performing precise movements, all while wearing your heavy royal regalia. It's exhausting, but any sign of fatigue or discomfort would be unthinkable. Divine kings do not show human weakness. As the ceremony concludes, the high priest turns to you. Amun has spoken, he announces. He blesses your northern campaign and confirms you as his chosen one, who will restore proper worship in the two lands. This divine endorsement is the final piece you needed. With the god's blessing, you can now proceed with absolute confidence in the righteousness of your cause. Emerging from the temple, you blink in the harsh sunlight. Your next duty awaits, a public audience where you'll hear petitions from your people. Being accessible to your subjects, at least symbolically, is an important aspect of Nubian kingship. A shaded pavilion has been prepared in the central plaza. You take your seat as the common people are allowed to approach, though not too closely, and only after being thoroughly searched by your guards. Security is always a concern for a ruler, even a divine one. The petitioners come one by one, farmers seeking resolution to land disputes, merchants requesting trading rights, officials reporting on the state of outlying provinces. Each approaches with profound deference, often trembling in your presence. It's strange to think that despite your absolute power, these brief interactions might be the only time your ordinary subjects ever see your face. You listen carefully to each petition. A pharaoh must be both firm and just. Your decisions here will be repeated throughout the kingdom, building your reputation as either a fair ruler or a tyrant. The weight of each judgment is not lost on you. A dispute between two village headmen catches your attention. They argue over water rights, a critical issue in this arid land. After hearing both sides, you render a decision that seems to surprise your advisors, rather than simply ruling in favour of the more influential man. You divide the water access more equitably, but command both villages to contribute labour to build an improved irrigation system that will ultimately benefit both communities. "The divine pharaoh is wise beyond measure," murmurs one of your advisors, genuine admiration in his voice. You allow yourself a slight smile. This is the kind of practical wisdom that has helped your kingdom prosper. While the Egyptians to the north have been fractured by internal conflicts, your Nubian state has remained stable and increasingly powerful. By now, the heat of the day has reached its peak. Even with servants waving ostrich feather fans to create a breeze, the temperature is nearly unbearable. A lesser person might retire to rest during these hottest hours, but a pharaoh's duties never cease. Next comes a meeting with foreign envoys. Your kingdom maintains diplomatic and trade relationships with powers throughout the region, from the other kingdoms of Central Africa to the city-states of Phoenicia and beyond. Today, a representative from a trading power along the Red Sea coast has brought gifts and a proposal for expanded trade relations. The diplomat approaches with elaborate courtesy, presenting luxurious gifts, rare spices, beautifully crafted textiles, and a cage containing exotic birds with plumage in colours you've never seen before. In return, you present him with gold, the precious metal for which your land is famous, along with ivory and finely crafted Nubian pottery. The diplomatic discussions are complex, touching on tariff rates, protected trade routes, and mutual defence against raiders who might threaten merchant caravans. You navigate these negotiations skillfully, securing favourable terms while maintaining the dignity and mystery that surrounds your divine status. As the foreign envoy departs, visibly impressed by both your wisdom and the splendour of your court, your chief steward approaches. "Divine One," he says quietly, "the royal architect awaits your approval for the new temple designs." You suppress a sigh. The administrative demands of kingship are endless. Now you must review plans for the monumental buildings that will cement your legacy. These structures will stand for thousands of years, telling future generations of your power and your devotion to the gods. The architect unrolls papyrus scrolls containing detailed drawings. The proposed temple complex is ambitious. Massive pylons, columned halls, sanctuaries, and accompanying structures that will require years to complete, and the labour of thousands. The central sanctuary will align perfectly with the rising sun on the day of your coronation, Great One, the architect explains, pointing to the precisely calculated orientations. You study the plans carefully. Such monuments are not merely displays of royal ego. They're essential expressions of cosmic order. Through these buildings, you create earthly reflections of the divine realm, establishing harmony between humans and gods. After making several refinements to the designs, you give your approval. Work will begin immediately. Another step in your grand vision for a unified empire stretching from deep in Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. By now, the day is waning. The setting sun casts a golden light across your city, but your duties are far from complete. A final war council awaits, where you'll review the detailed plans for your northern campaign. Your generals have gathered in a secure chamber, with guards posted to prevent any possibility of spies overhearing your military strategies. Maps are spread across a large stone table, marked with the positions of your forces and the known locations of potential Egyptian resistance. "We will sail north with the main force," explains your commander, tracing the course of the Nile. "Smaller units will move by land to secure key positions along the way. Our intelligence suggests the Egyptian forces are divided and unprepared for a coordinated attack." You listen intently, asking pointed questions about supply lines, the loyalty of potential allies among the Egyptian nobility, and contingency plans should unexpected resistance arise. Your commanders are impressed by your strategic thinking. You're not just a divine figurehead, but a genuine military leader. The meeting concludes with a solemn ritual. Each of your commanders drinks from a shared cup, symbolizing your united purpose and shared fate. They swear oaths of loyalty, pledging to follow you to victory or death. For Amun-Ra and the divine pharaoh, they proclaim in unison, their voices echoing off the stone walls. As the war council disperses, you're finally able to retire to your private chambers. Attendants remove your heavy crown and ceremonial garments, replacing them with lighter robes for the evening. They bring food, a lavish meal of roasted meats, fresh fruits, bread and wine, all tested by food tasters before reaching your table. Despite the luxury surrounding you, you eat moderately. A clear head is essential for the challenges ahead. As you dine, scribes read to you from reports and historical texts, information you need to absorb before tomorrow's duties begin anew. Finally, as night fully envelops your palace, you have a rare moment of solitude. Standing on your private balcony, you look out over your sleeping capital. In the distance, the Nile gleams silver in the moonlight, the same river that flows through the heart of Egypt, the land you will soon claim as your own. You think about the weight of history pressing upon your shoulders. For centuries, Egypt dominated Nubia. Now you will reverse that dynamic, leading a Nubian dynasty to rule over a unified empire. It's a moment that will be remembered for thousands of years, though not always as accurately as you might hope. Future civilizations will sometimes forget that your kingdom was every bit as sophisticated and cultured as Egypt. They'll overlook the fact that Nubia had its own ancient traditions, writing systems and impressive civilization independent of Egyptian influence. But you don't know this yet. Right now you're focused on the immense task before you. As you finally prepare for sleep, ritual prayers are spoken, protective amulets placed beside your bed. Even your rest is surrounded by ceremony and divine significance. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow will bring another day of relentless duties, complex decisions, and preparations for the campaign that will make you the first Nubian pharaoh of Egypt's 25th dynasty, a remarkable moment when the traditional power dynamic between two ancient civilizations was dramatically reversed. Your last thought before drifting into sleep is that perhaps the most challenging aspect of being a Nubian pharaoh isn't the physical demands or the constant ceremonies, it's the sheer weight of destiny. You stand at a pivotal moment in history, and the decisions you make will echo through the centuries. The gentle sound of the night breeze rustling through palm trees outside your window gradually fades as sleep overtakes you. Tomorrow, your journey to change the course of history continues. The morning comes early, as it always does in the desert. The first rays of sunlight filter through the narrow window of your palace chamber, and before you can fully appreciate the peaceful moment, your attendants arrive. Another demanding day as Pharaoh Pi begins. Today is different, though. Today marks the beginning of your historic northern campaign, the invasion of Egypt. Your armies have assembled, your ships are prepared, and the oracles have given favourable omens. It's time to change the course of history. You rise and undergo the same elaborate morning rituals as before: purification with sacred water, anointing with oils, dressing in royal regalia. But today your attendants add something special: the armour and weapons befitting a warrior king. A finely crafted breastplate of bronze scales sewn onto leather is placed over your royal garments. Your sword, its hilt inlaid with gold and ivory, is ceremonially presented to you. May Amun guide your blade, intones the high priest, bowing deeply. You step outside your palace to review your assembled forces. The sight is truly impressive. Thousands of warriors stretching as far as the eye can see. The famous Nubian archers form the elite units, their powerful bows nearly as tall as a man. These renowned bowmen are feared throughout the ancient world for their accuracy and the tremendous force of their shots, capable of penetrating armour at distances that seem impossible. The soldiers have prepared themselves spiritually as well as militarily. Many have purified themselves in the Nile, following ancient traditions. They wear amulets for divine protection and have painted their bodies with symbols sacred to various gods. Some units carry standards topped with divine emblems: the falcon of Horus, the ram's head of Amun. Great One, your general approaches. The fleet awaits your command. You nod and make your way to the river, where a fleet of ships is ready to transport your army northward. Your royal barge is a marvel of craftsmanship, its hull painted with protective eyes to guide it safely through the cataracts, its cabin decorated with gold and precious materials. As you board, musicians play triumphant melodies on flutes and drums. Priests burn incense and recite prayers for a successful campaign. The atmosphere is one of solemn determination mixed with religious fervour. This is not merely a military conquest, it's a divine mission to restore proper order and worship to a land that has fallen into chaos. With a blast of trumpets, the fleet begins its journey downstream. The Nile will carry you north toward destiny, but first you must navigate the challenging cataracts, sections of the river where rocky outcrops create dangerous rapids. Even for experienced Nubian sailors, these passages are treacherous. As your fleet approaches the first cataract, the crew springs into action. Some ships must be partially unloaded and dragged through shallow channels. Others navigate narrow passages between jagged rocks where a moment's inattention could mean destruction. You watch from your royal barge as your captains demonstrate their remarkable skill, guiding the vessels through the churning waters. The Egyptians believe these cataracts protect them from southern invasion, remarks your advisor. They think no large army could successfully navigate these waters. You smile slightly. Then they will be surprised. Days pass as your fleet makes its way northward. The landscape gradually changes. The narrow strip of fertile land along the Nile widens. Settlements become more frequent. You're entering the territory of Upper Egypt. The first test of your campaign comes at Elephantine, the traditional border between Nubia and Egypt. Here, a small garrison of Egyptian soldiers has prepared defences. They clearly weren't expecting an army of your size, but they stand their ground, loyal to their local ruler. You could easily overwhelm them with your superior numbers, but instead you try diplomacy first, a decision that will become characteristic of your conquest strategy. Tell them this, you instruct your herald. I come not to destroy, but to restore Mayat, divine order. Those who recognize me as the chosen of Amun will be treated with honor. Those who resist will face the consequences. The garrison commander requests time to consult with his superiors. You grant this reasonable request, showing restraint that impresses even your own generals. By the following morning, the Elephantine garrison has agreed to submit to your authority. Your first victory is achieved without bloodshed. This pattern repeats as you move further into Egyptian territory. Some cities surrender immediately upon seeing your overwhelming force. Others require demonstrations of your military might before yielding. You're careful to treat respectfully those who submit, allowing local officials to retain their positions if they swear loyalty to you. But those who resist stubbornly face the full might of your army. At Thebes, the spiritual capital of Egypt, you encounter a more complex situation. The city is controlled by priests of Amun who have been growing concerned about the diminishing respect for traditional religion shown by the competing princes of northern Egypt. You send emissaries to the high priest of Amun at Karnak, explaining that you come as a champion of proper worship and divine order. This message resonates with the priests, who have heard of your devotion to Amun and your magnificent temple building at Napata. The high priest himself comes to meet your ship as it docks at Thebes. He bows, not prostrating himself as your Nubian subjects would, but showing genuine respect. The oracle has spoken. He tells you. Amun welcomes his son from the south. This religious endorsement is perhaps more valuable than a military victory. With the blessing of Karnak's priests, your legitimacy as a potential ruler of Egypt is significantly enhanced. You make lavish offerings at the temple of Amun, demonstrating your piety and reinforcing your claim to be the god's chosen representative. For several days, you remain in Thebes, participating in religious ceremonies and meeting with local nobles. The city's residents watch you with curiosity. Many have never seen a Nubian up close, let alone one claiming pharaonic authority. You're conscious of their scrutiny and ensure that every public appearance showcases both your regal bearing and your respect for Egyptian traditions. They seem surprised that we are civilized, observes one of your Nubian commanders dryly. Let them be surprised, you reply. Soon they will understand that our civilization is as ancient and sophisticated as their own. With Thebes secured through diplomacy and religious alignment, you continue northward. The next major challenge awaits at Hermopolis, a significant city controlled by a prince named Namlot. Unlike the priests of Thebes, Namlot has no intention of surrendering his authority without a fight. The siege of Hermopolis tests your military leadership. For days, your forces surround the city, cutting off supplies while your engineers prepare siege equipment. Your archers keep the defenders pinned down, unable to effectively man their walls. Finally, recognizing the inevitability of defeat, Namlot sends a messenger requesting terms. You enter the captured city with restraint, preventing your soldiers from looting or harming civilians. This clemency makes an impression. You're demonstrating that your rule will bring stability, not destruction. In Namlot's palace, you discover an impressive collection of horses. You've always had a special affection for these animals, considering them noble creatures worthy of respect. When you learn that Namlot's horses have been neglected during the siege, given inadequate water and food, you're genuinely angered. One of the few times your royal composure cracks. You failed to care for these innocent animals, you demand of Namlot. This shows a flaw in your character more concerning than your military resistance. You order your own grooms to tend to the horses immediately and make note of this incident in the victory stele you'll later commission, an unusual detail that reveals your personal values amid the grand political narrative. As your campaign continues northward, word of your approach and your policy of mercy toward those who submit spreads ahead of you. Several more cities surrender without resistance, but the greatest challenge still lies ahead. Memphis, the ancient administrative capital, controlled by a coalition of northern princes led by a ruler named Tefnacht. Memphis is heavily fortified, its walls thick and well maintained, its location on the Nile strategically advantageous. A frontal assault would be costly, perhaps impossible, but you've developed a reputation for clever strategy as well as military might. Under cover of darkness, you send a portion of your fleet to approach the city from an unexpected direction. At dawn, your main force begins what appears to be a direct assault on the main gates, but this is merely a diversion. While the defenders focus on repelling this attack, your ships land troops at a less protected section of the city. The battle for Memphis is fierce but relatively brief. Your troops breach the walls and fighting erupts in the streets. You've given strict orders to avoid damaging temples and to spare civilians, but the defending soldiers are shown no such mercy. By midday, the city's defenders have either fallen or surrendered, and you make your triumphal entry into one of Egypt's most ancient and revered cities. Standing in the palace at Memphis, surrounded by the symbols of Egyptian royal power, you've achieved what might have seemed impossible, a Nubian king controlling Egypt's administrative center. But you know that military conquest is only the beginning of the true challenge, governing this vast territory and earning the acceptance of its people. The next days are filled with political maneuvering. You meet with local officials, priests and nobles, assessing who can be trusted in your new administration. You make offerings at Memphis's temples, particularly to Ptah, the city's patron deity. Every public act is calculated to reinforce your legitimacy as pharaoh. Some of the northern princes, including Tefnakht, have fled rather than face your advancing army. You could pursue them, but you make a surprising decision. You send messengers offering reconciliation if they submit to your authority. You'll allow them to maintain control of their territories as vassals if they swear loyalty to you as pharaoh. Is this wise, Divine One? Questions one of your generals. These men will remain threats as long as they live. Perhaps, you acknowledge. But I haven't come to destroy Egypt's governance, only to unite it under proper divine authority. If they accept me as their rightful ruler, I will accept their local administration. This pragmatic approach, unusual for conquering kings of this era, reflects your understanding that Egypt's administrative structure is too complex to simply replace with your own officials. Better to incorporate the existing system under your supreme authority than to dismantle it entirely. Remarkably, most of the princes accept your terms, swearing oaths of loyalty. Tefnakht, too proud to submit in person, sends tribute and a written oath. You accept this compromise, demonstrating both strength and flexibility. With Egypt now at least nominally united under your rule, you face a new challenge. How to govern this vast territory while maintaining your power base in Nubia. The distance between Memphis and Napata is enormous, over 1,000 miles along the winding course of the Nile. No single ruler can be physically present throughout such an expanse. You develop a system of governance that will characterize the Kushite rule of Egypt. You'll personally travel between the key centers, spending time in both Egypt and Nubia. Trusted family members and officials will serve as your representatives in different regions. Egyptian administrative structures will largely remain intact, but now answer to your authority. At Memphis, you commission a victory stele, a stone monument inscribed with the story of your conquest. Written in hieroglyphics, it details your campaign, emphasizes your piety toward Amun and other gods, and establishes your legitimacy as pharaoh. This victory stele of Paye, as historians will later call it, becomes one of the most important historical documents of your reign. With the political situation in Egypt stabilized, you make a decision that surprises many of your commanders. Rather than remaining in Egypt to solidify your personal rule, you announce your intention to return to Napata, your original capital in Nubia. The conquest is complete, but our homeland requires the pharaoh's presence, you explain. My nephew Shabaka will remain in Memphis as my representative. This decision reveals much about your conception of kingship. Unlike many conquerors who abandon their origins to embrace the wealth and prestige of their new territories, you maintain a deep connection to your Nubian homeland. Your identity remains rooted in Kush, even as you take on the additional mantle of Egyptian pharaoh. Before departing, you visit the ancient pyramid complexes at Giza and Saqqara. Standing in the shadow of these monumental structures, built nearly 2,000 years before your time, you're moved by their grandeur and spiritual significance. These visits will influence your later decision to revive pyramid building for royal burials, a practice Egyptians had abandoned centuries ago, but which will become a hallmark of your dynasty. The journey back to Napata is long but triumphant. At every major city along the Nile, you're greeted with celebrations. Your conquest has brought stability after decades of fragmentation, and many ordinary Egyptians welcome this new order, regardless of its foreign origin. Upon your return to Napata, you immediately visit the Great Temple of Amun, at the foot of Jebel Barkal, the sacred mountain. There, in an elaborate ceremony, you dedicate the spoils of your Egyptian campaign. Golden statues, precious jewellery, rare materials, and other valuables taken from the conquered territories. This reinforces your image as a pious king who shares his success with the gods. In the following years, you embark on an ambitious building program in both Egypt and Nubia. Temples are restored, expanded, and newly built. Palaces and administrative buildings rise in key cities. This construction serves multiple purposes. It honors the gods, provides employment for thousands, and creates visible symbols of your dynasty's power and legitimacy. Particularly significant is your work at the Temple of Amun at Jebel Barkal. You expand this already impressive complex, adding new sanctuaries and monumental gateways. The temple becomes the spiritual heart of your kingdom, a sacred site that unites Egyptian religious traditions with Nubian identity. You also introduce an innovation that will become one of the most recognizable features of your dynasty: royal pyramids. Though smaller than the Great Pyramids of Giza, these steep-sided structures built at El Kuru near Napata create an unmistakable visual link between your Kushite kingdom and ancient Egyptian traditions. Life as a ruler of two lands presents constant challenges. You must respect and uphold the distinct cultural traditions of both Egypt and Nubia while fostering a sense of unity. You must maintain religious legitimacy in both contexts, and you must constantly guard against potential rebellions or external threats. Your days follow a pattern of relentless duty. Dawn begins with purification rituals and prayers, followed by meetings with officials from various regions of your empire. You review reports on agricultural production, tax collection, military readiness, and foreign relations. You personally judge important legal cases, setting precedents for your officials to follow in more routine matters. Religious ceremonies occupy a significant portion of your time. As a divine king, you must maintain proper relationships with the gods through regular offerings and participation in festivals. The calendar is filled with sacred days requiring your presence at various temples. Building projects demand your attention as well. You review architectural plans, visit construction sites, and make decisions about materials, designs, and inscriptions. These structures will stand for millennia. They must perfectly express your royal ideology and religious devotion. Despite your conquest of Egypt, you never fully abandon Nubian cultural elements. Your royal iconography blends Egyptian and Kushite features. You're portrayed wearing the double crown of Egypt, but also distinctively Nubian royal symbols. In official contexts, you use both Egyptian hieroglyphics and Meroitic script, the writing system of your Nubian homeland. This cultural duality extends to your personal life. Your primary wives come from noble Nubian families, maintaining your connection to your homeland's elite. But you also form marriage alliances with Egyptian noble houses, binding them to your dynasty through family ties. Your children receive education in both cultures. They learn Egyptian religious texts and administrative systems, but also maintain Nubian traditions and language. This bicultural upbringing prepares them to rule an empire spanning diverse peoples and regions. Years pass, and you begin to feel the weight of age and responsibility. You've achieved what seemed impossible, establishing a Nubian dynasty that rules Egypt not through brute force alone, but with religious legitimacy and administrative skill. You've been accepted as a true pharaoh, your name included in official king lists alongside native Egyptian rulers. As you approach the end of your reign, you make careful preparations for succession. Your nephew Shabaka, who has proven himself as your representative in Memphis, is positioned to take the throne after you. The transition must be smooth to maintain the stability you've worked so hard to establish. In your final years, you commission your tomb, a pyramid at El Kuru that will house your mummified remains along with treasures to sustain you in the afterlife. The burial chamber is decorated with scenes showing you in the company of gods, particularly Amun-Ra, to whom you've demonstrated such devotion throughout your life. When death finally comes, you face it with the same dignity that characterized your reign. Your body undergoes the elaborate Egyptian mummification process, preserved for eternity. You're buried with honor in your pyramid tomb, surrounded by offerings and protective amulets. Your legacy is secure. You founded a dynasty that will rule Egypt for nearly a century, bringing a period of stability, religious revival, and cultural flourishing. Future generations will know you as Paye, or Pianki, first of the Black Pharaohs, the Nubian king who conquered Egypt and ruled it with wisdom and piety. And though the pharaoh's death marks an ending, it also heralds a beginning, the continuation of the remarkable Kushite 25th dynasty, whose story is far from complete. For now, your successor Shabaka assumes the double crown, facing the same immense challenges you once did, balancing two cultures, maintaining divine legitimacy and protecting a vast empire against both internal division and external threats. Imagine now that you are Shabaka, nephew of the great Piye and the new pharaoh of the 25th dynasty. The weight of the double crown sits heavily upon your head as you contemplate the vast empire you've inherited, stretching from deep in Nubia all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Your uncle conquered Egypt. Your task is perhaps even more challenging: to solidify Nubian rule and make it accepted as legitimate by both Egyptians and your homeland Nubians. The morning sun streams through the columns of your palace in Memphis. Unlike your uncle, who returned to Napata after the conquest, you've chosen to make your primary residence here in Egypt's traditional administrative capital. It's a strategic decision. To rule Egypt effectively, you must be present in its heart. Your morning rituals begin, similar to those your uncle experienced, but with subtle differences reflecting your own religious emphasis. You're known for your particular devotion to ancient traditions, seeing yourself as a restorer of Egypt's classical religious practices. This reverence for tradition will become one of the defining characteristics of your reign. As attendants dress you in the regalia of a pharaoh, you mentally prepare for the day's most important event, the unveiling of what future historians will call the Shabaka stone, though you know it simply as a sacred text you've commissioned to be preserved for eternity. Is the temple prepared? You ask your chief priest. Yes, Divine One, he replies with a deep bow. The stone has been placed in the Temple of Ptah as you commanded. This project has been close to your heart, the preservation of an ancient religious text that was deteriorating on an old papyrus. You ordered it carved into black basalt, ensuring it would survive for eternity. The text describes the Memphite theology, explaining how the god Ptah created the world through his heart, understanding, and tongue, speech. It's a profound theological document that connects creation itself to Memphis, the city where you now rule. What you couldn't possibly know is that this stone will survive long after your dynasty falls. Nearly 2,500 years later, it will be discovered by European archaeologists, becoming one of the most important sources for understanding ancient Egyptian religious thought. Your act of preservation will prove more lasting than the military conquests that brought your family to power. After a light breakfast of bread, dates and watered wine, you proceed to the temple for the dedication ceremony. Your procession through Memphis is an elaborate affair. Guards clear the way, musicians play solemn melodies, and priests carry sacred emblems. The people prostrate themselves as you pass, a living God walking among them. The Temple of Ptah is one of Memphis's most ancient and revered sanctuaries. Inside, the cool dimness provides relief from the growing heat of the day. Incense smoke curls toward the ceiling as priests chant prayers. The stone you've commissioned sits prominently in the main hall, its polished black surface gleaming in the light of oil lamps. The dedication ceremony is lengthy and complex, involving multiple offerings and recitations. You personally read portions of the sacred text aloud, your voice echoing through the temple chambers. By preserving this ancient wisdom, you're making a powerful statement about your reign. You may be Nubian by birth, but you are the true guardian of Egyptian tradition. After the ceremony, you return to the palace for the daily business of governance. Your approach to ruling differs somewhat from your uncle's. Where Pa was a warrior king who conquered through military might, you're more of a scholar king, focused on cultural and religious revival. Both approaches have their place in securing your dynasty's position. Your officials bring reports from throughout the realm. Tax collection proceeds effectively, ensuring the wealth needed for your building projects and to maintain the army. The Nile flood has been favourable this year, promising good harvests. Local administrators, mostly Egyptians whom you've kept in their positions, report general peace and compliance with your rule. But there are always challenges. A noble from the Delta region has been spreading dissent, questioning whether a Nubian can truly be a legitimate pharaoh. You must decide how to respond. Bring him to Memphis, you command after consideration. Not in chains, but with honour. I will show him that I am more devoted to Egyptian traditions than he is himself. This approach typifies your rule, using cultural authority rather than brute force whenever possible. You understand that the Kushite dynasty must earn acceptance through demonstrating its commitment to Egyptian values, particularly religious ones. Later that day, you meet with the architects overseeing your building projects. Under your direction, temples throughout Egypt are being restored and expanded. You're particularly focused on the temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor in Thebes, the spiritual heart of Egypt. The new hypo-style hall at Karnak will be completed before the next inundation, the chief architect assures you, showing detailed plans drawn on papyrus. You nod approvingly. These massive building projects serve multiple purposes. They honour the gods, provide employment for thousands of workers, and create visible symbols of your dynasty's power and piety. The distinctive Kushite architectural touches you've incorporated, particular column styles and decorative elements, will mark these buildings as products of your reign for centuries to come. As evening approaches, you're reminded of another crucial aspect of pharaonic duty, family affairs. Your sister Amanirdis has been installed as God's wife of Amun in Thebes, a position of immense religious and political importance. She effectively governs Upper Egypt in your name through this religious office. A messenger has arrived with her reports and requests. The god's wife of Amun was traditionally a celibate priestess who married the god symbolically, managing his extensive temple properties and wealth. By installing your sister in this position, you've placed a loyal family member in control of one of Egypt's most powerful institutions. It's a strategy that began with your uncle Pa and continues under your rule. You review Amanirdis's reports with care. She writes of religious ceremonies performed, administrative decisions made, and political situations requiring your awareness. Her position helps ensure that Thebes, always potentially rebellious, remains firmly under Kushite control. As night falls, you finally have a more private meal with your family, your Nubian wife Tebekkenamun, your children, and close relatives who serve in your administration. Here, the formality of court life relaxes somewhat. Conversations switch between the Egyptian language you use for official business and your native Nubian tongue. Your children are growing up between two cultures, educated in both Egyptian and Nubian traditions. They represent the bicultural future you envision for your dynasty. Your oldest son, Shebitku, watches and learns from your example, knowing he will likely inherit the double crown one day. Later, in the relative privacy of your chambers, you review a diplomatic message that arrived earlier from Assyria, the powerful empire expanding from Mesopotamia. Their king Sargon II sends formal greetings, but there's an undercurrent of tension. Assyrian influence is growing in the Levant, the region along the eastern Mediterranean that serves as a buffer between your realm and theirs. We must watch them carefully, you tell your foreign affairs advisor. For now, maintain cordial relations, but strengthen our presence in the eastern delta and Sinai. This nascent Assyrian threat will grow in the coming years, eventually becoming the greatest external challenge to Kushite rule in Egypt. But for now, it remains distant, something to monitor rather than fear. Before sleeping, you perform private devotions, praying to Amun-Ra and other deities for guidance and protection. The religious sincerity of the Kushite pharaohs is noteworthy. Your dynasty's legitimacy rests heavily on your role as divine intermediaries chosen by Amun to restore proper worship and cosmic order. As you drift towards sleep, you reflect on your accomplishments and the challenges ahead. Your reign has brought stability and religious revival. You've cemented the legitimacy of Kushite rule through your devotion to Egyptian traditions while maintaining your distinctive Nubian identity. The remarkable Black Pharaoh dynasty that began with your uncle Paye continues to flourish under your guidance. Years pass, and eventually you too must face mortality. When death comes, you're buried with full Egyptian royal honours in a pyramid tomb at El Kuru in your Nubian homeland, continuing the tradition established by Piye. Your nephew Shebitku succeeds you, becoming the third Kushite pharaoh of Egypt's 25th dynasty. Shebitku's reign is relatively brief, but continues the patterns established by you and Paye, maintaining Kushite control over Egypt, supporting religious institutions, and carefully watching the growing Assyrian threat to the northeast. But it's his successor who will truly define the dynasty in both glory and tragedy. Now imagine that you are Taharqa, the fourth ruler of the Kushite dynasty. You ascend to the throne as a young man, energetic and ambitious. Your predecessors conquered Egypt and established Kushite rule. You intend to raise the dynasty to even greater heights. Your coronation takes place at Tanis in the Egyptian Delta, signifying your control over all Egypt from its northernmost regions to the depths of Nubia in the south. The crown placed upon your head represents not just a political office, but a divine role. You are now the living embodiment of Horus, mediator between gods and humans, responsible for maintaining cosmic order. The early years of your reign fulfill your ambitions. You prove to be the greatest builder of the Kushite dynasty, commissioning temples, palaces, and monuments throughout Egypt and Nubia. Your name will be found from the Delta to the fourth cataract of the Nile, inscribed on columns and statues that will stand for millennia. At Karnak, you construct a magnificent colonnade in the temple court with massive columns topped by open papyrus capitals. Though time will eventually leave only one of these columns standing, it will remain an impressive testament to your architectural ambition, towering nearly 70 feet high, covered with exquisite relief carvings. At Jebel Barkal, in your Nubian homeland, you expand the sacred complex dedicated to Amun. The temple of Mut, consort of Amun, is carved directly into the rock face of the sacred mountain. Inside, reliefs show you making offerings to the gods. legitimizing your rule through divine approval. Your building projects extend to practical works as well. You order the construction of new irrigation systems, improving agricultural productivity. Wells are dug in desert regions to support trade routes. These pragmatic improvements benefit ordinary people's lives, while also strengthening your economic and military position. One morning, as you review plans for a new temple at Kawa in Nubia, a messenger arrives with concerning news from the northeast. Divine One, he reports after prostrating himself, Assyrian forces have invaded the Levant in greater numbers than ever before. Several city-states that pay tribute to Egypt have appealed for our protection. This is the moment when external politics will begin to dominate your reign. The Assyrian Empire, based in Mesopotamia, has been expanding westward for decades. Now, under their king Esarhaddon, they present a direct threat to Egyptian interests and ultimately to Egypt itself. You call your military commanders and advisors for an emergency council. Maps are spread before you, showing the Levantine coastal regions and the advancing Assyrian positions. For centuries, Egypt has considered this area part of its sphere of influence, a buffer protecting its northeastern frontier. We must support our vassals, you declare after hearing various opinions. Prepare the army to march eastward. This decision sets in motion events that will define the latter part of your reign. The initial engagement with Assyrian forces goes well. Your army successfully pushes them back, protecting Egyptian allied cities in the Levant. You commission victory monuments celebrating this success, not realizing it will prove temporary. The demands of international politics now occupy much of your time. You forge alliances with various powers who also fear Assyrian expansion. One of your most significant partnerships is with King Hezekiah of Judah, who resists Assyrian domination. This alliance enters religious texts that will still be read thousands of years later. The Hebrew Bible records how Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, Taharka, came to support Judah against the Assyrian king Sennacherib during his siege of Jerusalem. The biblical account describes how the Assyrian army mysteriously withdrew after your intervention, a significant diplomatic and military achievement for your dynasty. Despite these initial successes, the Assyrian threat continues to grow. Their technological and military advantages, iron weapons, advanced siege equipment, and overwhelming numbers make them a formidable enemy. Your kingdoms of Egypt and Kush, though wealthy and sophisticated, struggle to match their military innovations. In 671 BCE, disaster strikes. Esarhaddon launches a massive invasion of Egypt itself. Your forces fight valiantly but are overwhelmed by the Assyrian war machine. Memphis falls and you are forced to retreat southward to Thebes. For the first time, the Kushite control of Egypt is seriously threatened. The following months are among the most challenging of your reign. From Thebes, you reorganize your forces and plan a counterattack. When news arrives that Esarhaddon has withdrawn the bulk of his army to deal with matters elsewhere, you seize the opportunity. A rapid advance northward allows you to recapture Memphis and restore Kushite control over much of Egypt. This victory proves short-lived. In 669 BCE, Esarhaddon marches on Egypt again. Though he dies during the campaign, his son Ashurbanipal continues the invasion. The Assyrian forces are overwhelming, and this time they push beyond Memphis to Thebes itself. The capture and plundering of Thebes in 663 BCE marks a traumatic moment in Egyptian history. This great religious centre, which had stood inviolate for centuries, is now in foreign hands. The Assyrians loot its temples and palaces, carrying away countless treasures, including 2 massive obelisks that will be transported all the way to Nineveh. you are forced to retreat to your Nubian homeland, effectively ending Kushite control of Egypt. After nearly a century of rule, the 25th dynasty's dominion over the two lands comes to an end. Yet even in this defeat, you maintain your royal dignity and religious authority. In Napata and throughout Nubia, you are still pharaoh, still the divine king chosen by Amun. The final years of your reign focus on strengthening your Nubian kingdom and preserving what remains of your dynasty's legacy. You continue building projects in Nubia, particularly at Nuri, where you establish a new royal cemetery. Your pyramid there, larger than those of your predecessors, will become your final resting place. Despite the loss of Egypt, you're remembered as one of the greatest kings of the 25th dynasty. Your architectural achievements, military campaigns, and cultural patronage leave an indelible mark on both Egyptian and Nubian history. The religious revival you and your predecessors championed influences Egyptian culture long after Kushite political control ends. When death finally comes, you're buried with appropriate ceremony in your pyramid at Nuri. Your successor Tantamani will make one last attempt to restore Kushite control in Egypt, briefly recapturing Memphis before being permanently driven back by the Assyrians and their Egyptian allies. The 25th dynasty's rule over Egypt has ended, but its legacy endures. For nearly a century, Nubian kings ruled as pharaohs, bringing stability, religious revival, and cultural flourishing after a period of fragmentation. They governed not as foreign occupiers, but as legitimate pharaohs, accepted within the ancient Egyptian tradition. The distinctive artistic style developed during your dynasty, blending Egyptian and Nubian elements, continues to influence creative expression in both regions. The religious texts you preserved, particularly the Memphite theology on the Shabaka stone, ensure that ancient wisdom survives for future generations, and the pyramids you built in Nubia stand as enduring monuments to your dynasty's power and cultural sophistication. Perhaps most importantly, your dynasty demonstrates that the relationship between Egypt and Nubia was never simply one of Egyptian dominance. These two ancient African civilizations influenced each other profoundly over thousands of years, sometimes as rivals, sometimes as partners, and during your remarkable era with Nubians as Egypt's divinely appointed rulers. Far from the stereotype of a peripheral civilization existing in Egypt's shadow, your Kushite kingdom reveals itself as a sophisticated power with its own distinct traditions, capable of not only resisting Egyptian influence, but of conquering and ruling Egypt itself. The story of the Black Pharaohs stands as a powerful reminder of Africa's complex history and the remarkable civilizations it produced long before European colonization. As the stars shine over your pyramid tomb at Nuri, your legacy lives on, in monuments that still stand, in texts still studied, and in the permanent reframing of the relationship between two of Africa's greatest ancient civilizations. Now that we've explored the grand political narratives of the Nubian pharaohs, let's step away from the royal palaces and battlefields to discover what life was like for ordinary people living under the rule of the Black Pharaohs. After all, empires aren't just made of kings and conquests. They're built on the daily lives, labours, and beliefs of thousands of individuals whose names rarely appear in historical records. Imagine you're no longer a pharaoh, but instead an ordinary resident of the Kushite kingdom during the height of the 25th dynasty. The sun rises over your mud brick home in a small village along the Nile, somewhere between the 3rd and 4th cataracts in what is now northern Sudan. This is the heartland of Kush, the powerful African kingdom that sent its rulers north to conquer Egypt. Your home is simple but comfortable, built of sun-dried mud bricks that keep the interior surprisingly cool despite the scorching heat outside. The walls are thick with small windows placed high to create air circulation while minimizing the direct sunlight. The flat roof, accessible by a ladder, serves as an outdoor sleeping area during the hottest months when the interior becomes too warm at night. Inside, the floor is packed earth, swept clean each morning. Reed mats provide seating during the day and bedding at night. Storage jars contain your household's precious grain supply, carefully protected from mice and insects. Clay oil lamps provide light after sunset, though most activities follow the natural rhythm of daylight. As the first rays of sun filter through your doorway, you rise to begin your day. If you're a farmer, as most people in this society are, your schedule is dictated by the seasons and the river. During the inundation, when the Nile floods and covers your fields, you might work on maintaining irrigation channels or on other tasks like repairing tools and buildings. After the waters recede, leaving behind fertile silt, the planting begins, backbreaking work of preparing the soil and sowing seeds. The Nubian agricultural system relies on both the natural flooding of the Nile and increasingly sophisticated irrigation methods. The shadaf, a simple but effective device with a counterweight on one end of a pole and a bucket on the other, allows you to lift water from the river to irrigate fields beyond the natural flood zone. More complex water wheel systems, powered by oxen, expand the arable land even further. Your main crops include sorghum and millet, ancient indigenous grains perfectly adapted to the African climate. These hardy plants form the foundation of the Nubian diet. You also grow barley for making beer, various vegetables like onions and cucumbers, and perhaps some fruit trees if you're fortunate enough to have a garden plot. If you're a woman in this household, your morning begins with food preparation, using a stone grinding pallet, a technology unchanged for thousands of years. You grind sorghum or millet into flour for the day's bread. This is physically demanding work, requiring strength and endurance as you push the grinding stone back and forth across the base stone for up to an hour to produce enough flour for your family. The bread you make isn't the raised loaves familiar to Egyptians, but flatter, denser cakes cooked on a clay griddle over an open fire. Sometimes you might add honey or dates for special occasions, but most days it's simply the plain staple that provides most of your family's calories. While the main meal is being prepared, children are sent to collect water from the Nile or from community wells. Water carriers balanced on heads are a common sight, with young girls learning this skill from an early age. The water not only serves for drinking and cooking, but also for the ritual washing that precedes prayers in this increasingly Amun-centered religious culture. If your family has animals, perhaps a few goats, sheep or chickens, they need tending as well. Livestock represents wealth and food security in this agricultural society. Cattle are especially prized, though typically only the more affluent families own them. For most ordinary households, smaller animals provide occasional meat, milk and eggs to supplement the grain-based diet. By mid-morning, the day's heat begins to build. If you're working in the fields, you've already been labouring for several hours, perhaps alongside neighbours in a communal work arrangement. Agricultural labour is often organised collectively, with families helping each other during critical planting and harvesting times. The social structure of Nubian villages maintains some egalitarian principles despite the highly stratified nature of the broader kingdom. Village elders make many local decisions through consensus, though all ultimately answer to officials appointed by the pharaoh's administration. Land ownership follows complex patterns, with some plots held communally and others allocated to specific families. If you're not a farmer, you might be engaged in one of the many specialized crafts essential to Nubian society. Pottery production is particularly significant. Nubian ceramics are not just functional items, but works of art with distinctive decorative patterns that archaeologists can still identify thousands of years later. The characteristic black-topped redware created through a special firing technique is especially valued. Other crucial crafts include weaving, basketry, leatherworking, and metallurgy. Goldworking is particularly important in the Kushite kingdom, which controls major gold-producing regions. The precious metal isn't just for royal treasuries. It appears in jewelry worn by many levels of society, though the quantity and quality vary dramatically by social status. By midday, the sun is merciless. Work often pauses during these hottest hours, with families retreating to shade for the main meal of the day. This typically consists of bread, beer, and perhaps a vegetable stew flavoured with locally grown herbs and spices. Meat is reserved for special occasions for most ordinary families. The beer you drink bears little resemblance to modern versions. It's thick, nutritious, and relatively low in alcohol, more of a staple food than an intoxicant. Everyone drinks it, including children, as it's often safer than water and provides essential calories and nutrients. After the midday meal and rest, work resumes in the slightly cooler late afternoon hours. For children, this might include formal education if you're from a privileged family connected to the temple or administrative systems. The Kushite elite are literate in both Egyptian hieroglyphics and the indigenous Meroitic script, though the latter develops more fully after the 25th dynasty period. For most children, however, education is practical rather than literary, learning the skills they'll need as adults by working alongside parents and other adults. Boys typically follow their father's occupations, while girls learn domestic skills and crafts from their mothers and other female relatives. As the workday winds down, community life becomes more prominent. The village marketplace might come alive in the cooler evening hours, with people trading goods, exchanging news, and socializing. If you have items to trade, perhaps excess produce from your garden or crafts you've made, you'll barter for things your household needs. While most day-to-day exchange happens through barter, the Kushite kingdom does use certain standardized values for larger transactions. Gold rings of specific weight serve as a form of currency among merchants and for tax payments to royal officials. Speaking of taxes, the pharaoh's presence is felt even in remote villages through the regular collection of a portion of your harvest or production. Royal officials maintain detailed records of what each community owes, with local headmen responsible for ensuring proper payment. These taxes support the court, temples, military, and the massive building projects that characterize the 25th dynasty. If you're living during the height of Kushite power when they controlled Egypt, you might occasionally see these resources returning to your community in the form of infrastructure improvements, irrigation systems, grain storage facilities, and temples. The Kushite pharaohs, particularly Taharqa, were known for practical public works that benefited ordinary people alongside their more monumental construction projects. As evening approaches, religious observances become part of many households' routines, while the elaborate ceremonies of the great temples are conducted by professional priests. Family-level worship takes place in homes and local shrines. Small figurines representing deities, Amun-Ra, Isis, Hathor, and others from the Egyptian pantheon, along with indigenous Nubian gods like Apedamak, the lion-headed warrior god, might occupy a special niche in your home. The religious practice of ordinary Nubians during This period represents a fascinating synthesis. While the royal ideology centers heavily on Amun-Ra, everyday spirituality incorporates a broader range of deities and practices. Some elements date back to the indigenous A group and C group cultures of prehistoric Nubia, while others reflect Egyptian influence from centuries of cultural exchange. Protective amulets are commonly worn, especially by children and pregnant women thought to be particularly vulnerable to spiritual dangers. These might be simple clay or stone pendants inscribed with divine symbols, or more elaborate pieces made of faience, a ceramic material with a glassy surface if your family has means. After the evening meal, another round of bread with perhaps some dried fish, lentils or vegetables, families gather to socialize. Storytelling is an important tradition, with elders passing down historical and mythological narratives that reinforce cultural identity and values. These stories often feature the exploits of kings and gods, but also trickster tales and moral fables that provide entertainment and instruction. Music and dance form another essential aspect of community life. Simple instruments, drums made of pottery or wood covered with animal skin, reed flutes, rattles, and stringed instruments similar to small harps, accompany songs and dances for both ceremonial and recreational purposes. Public performances might mark festivals, weddings, or other significant community events. As the stars appear in the clear desert sky, most village activities wind down. Without artificial lighting, sleep patterns generally follow the natural cycle of daylight. During the hottest seasons, many people sleep on rooftops to catch evening breezes, with entire families spreading reed mats across the flat mud brick surfaces. This cycle of daily life continues with seasonal variations. The agricultural calendar dictates much of the year's rhythm, with intense periods of activity during planting and harvest interspersed with somewhat less demanding seasons. Religious festivals mark important transitions, the beginning of the Nile flood, the harvest, and astronomical events like solstices. If you're living in one of the larger urban centres like Napata rather than a rural village, your daily experience differs significantly. Cities serve as administrative, religious and commercial hubs with more specialised occupations and greater social stratification. Urban dwellers might work as scribes in the royal administration, recording tax collections, inventorying temple property, or drafting correspondence. Others serve as priests in the elaborate temple complexes that form the spiritual centres of Kushite society. Craftspeople in cities often produce more specialised luxury goods for the elite: fine jewellery, decorated weapons, cosmetic items, and elaborate furnishings. The social hierarchy becomes more visible in urban settings. While rural villages maintain certain egalitarian traditions, cities display clear distinctions between the royal court, nobility, priests, merchants, artisans, and labourers. These distinctions manifest in housing, clothing, diet, and access to resources. At the apex of this hierarchy stands the royal court. Life in the palace operates according to elaborate protocols that regulate everything from how one approaches the pharaoh to who may speak in royal councils. The king's daily routine involves numerous ceremonies and religious rituals alongside the practical business of governance. High officials and nobles occupy the next tier, overseeing various aspects of the kingdom's administration. Many hold hereditary positions passed from father to son, creating powerful families whose fortunes are tied to royal favour. Their residences, substantial compounds with multiple rooms around central courtyards, reflect their status, as do their fine linen garments and gold jewellery. Priests constitute another elite group, especially those serving in the main temples dedicated to Amun-Ra. Temple complexes function almost as cities within cities, with their own economies, workshops, and administrative systems. Some priests serve temporarily on a rotating basis, while others hold permanent positions requiring specialized knowledge of rituals and texts. merchants and skilled artisans form a kind of middle class, particularly in cities along major trade routes. International trade brings valuable goods from throughout Africa, the Mediterranean and the Near East. Incense from Punt, Somalia, timber from Lebanon, copper from Sinai, exotic animals and ivory from Central Africa. Controlling this trade brings wealth and influence to certain families and guilds. For urban labourers, construction workers, porters, domestic servants and others providing essential services, life is more challenging. While not enslaved, though slavery does exist in the Kushite kingdom primarily for captured prisoners of war and their descendants, their economic security depends entirely on continued employment, making them vulnerable to illness or injury. Housing reflects these social distinctions. Elite residences feature multiple rooms around courtyards with plastered and painted walls, decorative elements, and separate spaces for different functions. Middle-class homes are smaller but still subdivided for specialized uses. The urban poor might occupy single-room dwellings in densely packed neighborhoods, sometimes with extended families sharing limited space. Clothing similarly signals social position. The elite wear fine linen garments, often pleated and adorned with colourful borders. Gold jewellery, including heavy collars and bracelets, completes their outfits. Ordinary people make do with simpler linen or cotton clothing, with more modest adornments of beads, faience, or copper. Children often go naked or nearly so until puberty, a practical adaptation to the hot climate. Personal appearance receives careful attention across all social classes. Nubian hairstyles are elaborate and distinctive, with braided patterns that can indicate age, status, and regional identity. Both men and women use oils to protect their skin from the harsh sun and cosmetics for both practical protection and aesthetic enhancement. Kohl, a dark mineral pigment, lines the eyes, helping to reduce glare and prevent eye infections while also being decoratively pleasing. For women in Kushite society, roles vary by social class. Elite women may have considerable influence, particularly those connected to the royal family or holding religious offices. The institution of the god's wife of Amun, controlled by Kushite princesses during the 25th dynasty, represents one of the highest status positions available to women in the ancient world, with both religious authority and substantial political power. Ordinary women manage households, contribute to agricultural labour, and often engage in specialised crafts like pottery and textile production. Some evidence suggests Nubian society granted women more autonomy than contemporary Egyptian culture, particularly in legal matters like property ownership. Female figures in Kushite art appear in a wider variety of active roles than their Egyptian counterparts. Health and medicine reflect a combination of practical knowledge and religious beliefs. Some herbal remedies used by Nubian healers contain genuinely effective compounds, while other treatments rely more on spiritual intervention. Life expectancy is short by modern standards, perhaps 30-40 years on average, with high infant mortality and significant risks associated with childbirth for women. Now imagine the changes that occur when the Kushite pharaohs lose control of Egypt after the Assyrian invasions. The kingdom contracts to its Nubian heartland, with the royal court permanently established at Napata. While this represents a political setback, in many ways daily life continues, much as before for ordinary people in the Nubian territories. The loss of Egyptian resources does require adjustments. Without access to certain Egyptian luxury goods, local alternatives develop. The architecture of temples and palaces evolves to incorporate more indigenous elements alongside the Egyptian-influenced styles that dominated during the 25th dynasty. Religion also undergoes subtle transformations. While Amun-Ra remains the principal deity, indigenous Nubian gods like Apedimak gain prominence. Temples built after the retreat from Egypt feature these distinctly Nubian deities more prominently, though always within a framework heavily influenced by Egyptian religious concepts. The kingdom's centre of gravity begins to shift southward. Eventually, around 300 BCE, the royal capital moves from Napata to Meroe, further south along the Nile. This marks the transition from what scholars call the Napatan period to the Meroitic period of Kushite history. Meroe develops as a major iron-producing centre, with numerous furnaces processing ore from nearby sources. This technological specialisation provides economic strength that helps the kingdom maintain its independence despite the loss of Egypt. The distinctive steep-sided Nubian pyramids continue to be built for rulers and elites, now at sites near Meroe rather than El Kuru or Nuri. The Meroitic period sees the full development of the indigenous writing system, the Meroitic script. While clearly inspired by Egyptian hieroglyphics, it represents the Kushite language, which is entirely different from Egyptian. Official inscriptions now appear in both hieroglyphics and Meroitic, reflecting the kingdom's dual cultural heritage. Trade routes shift somewhat, with greater emphasis on connections to Central Africa and the Red Sea rather than the Mediterranean. Exotic goods still flow through the kingdom, however, including items from as far away as India and China that arrive via Red Sea ports and overland routes. Throughout these transitions, certain distinctive aspects of Kushite culture persist. The famous Nubian archers maintain their reputation for excellence, serving as the military backbone of the kingdom. Pottery styles continue to display the characteristic decorative patterns that identify them as distinctly Nubian. Religious syncretism, the blending of Egyptian and indigenous traditions, remains a defining cultural feature. Perhaps most significantly, the memory of the 25th dynasty, when Kushite kings ruled as pharaohs of Egypt, continues to provide ideological legitimacy for the royal line. Even centuries after the retreat from Egypt, Kushite rulers portray themselves with the double crown and other symbols of Egyptian kingship, maintaining the claim to be rightful heirs to this ancient tradition. For ordinary people, these grand political narratives might seem distant from daily concerns of agriculture, family, and local community. Yet the cultural pride associated with the Black Pharaoh period likely permeates society at all levels, reinforcing a sense of Kushite identity and historical importance that helps sustain the kingdom through various challenges. This remarkable civilization continues for centuries after the 25th dynasty ends, with the kingdom of Kush remaining independent until around the 4th century CE. Eventually, changing trade patterns, resource depletion, and pressure from the rising kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia contribute to its decline. But the legacy of Kush, and particularly the extraordinary period when Nubian kings ruled as Egypt's 25th dynasty, endures far beyond the kingdom's political existence. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal the sophistication of this African civilization, challenging earlier historical narratives that marginalized Nubia's role or portrayed it merely as a cultural appendage to Egypt. The story of the Black Pharaohs and the kingdom they ruled stands as a powerful reminder of Africa's complex pre-colonial history, a story of sophisticated states with monumental architecture, distinctive artistic traditions, complex religious systems, and far-reaching trade networks. Far from being peripheral to world history, Nubia and its remarkable 25th dynasty represent a central chapter in the development of ancient civilization. As our journey through the world of the Nubian Black Pharaohs draws to a close, let's explore how this remarkable chapter of history was almost forgotten, then rediscovered, and what it means for our understanding of ancient Africa and world history today. The story of how the Black Pharaohs' legacy survived through millennia is perhaps as fascinating as their reign itself. Imagine now that you're standing in the scorching desert of northern Sudan. The year is 1842, and you're a European explorer named Carl Richard Lepsius. The ruins before you are breathtaking. Dozens of steep-sided pyramids rising from the sand, temples with columns covered in hieroglyphics and statues of forgotten kings. Yet almost nobody in Europe or America knows these monuments exist. For centuries, Western understanding of ancient history focused almost exclusively on Greece, Rome, and Egypt, largely ignoring the sophisticated civilizations that flourished in Nubia. When Nubia was mentioned at all, it was usually portrayed as a primitive cultural backwater, significant only as Egypt's source of gold and slaves. This narrative was deeply flawed as Lepsius and other early archaeologists were beginning to discover. The pyramids they found at El Kuru, Nuri and Meroe were not poor imitations of Egyptian monuments, but expressions of a distinct and sophisticated civilization with its own traditions and achievements. The inscriptions they documented revealed kings and queens who had not only ruled Nubia but had conquered and governed Egypt itself as the 25th dynasty. Why had this history been so thoroughly forgotten in Western accounts? Part of the answer lies in ancient politics. When the Assyrians drove the Kushite rulers from Egypt, they attempted to erase evidence of the 25th dynasty, destroying statues and monuments. Later, Egyptian pharaohs of the 26th dynasty continued this process, deliberately damaging or usurping Kushite monuments and inscriptions. But a deeper reason relates to modern prejudices. When European scholars began systematically studying ancient Egypt in the 18th and 19th centuries, many were uncomfortable with evidence of sophisticated black African civilizations that had conquered and ruled Egypt. Such findings contradicted the racial theories used to justify European colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. As one prominent 19th century scholar put it when confronted with evidence of Nubia's achievements, "I cannot recognize in the people portrayed the Negro type. The so-called Ethiopian dynasty was not of Negro but Hamitic origin." This remarkable statement reveals how deeply racial prejudice influenced supposedly objective historical analysis, leading scholars to either ignore Nubian achievements or attribute them to supposedly non-African influences. Fortunately, archaeological evidence is persistent. Throughout the 20th century, continued excavations revealed more and more of Nubia's remarkable history. The construction of the Aswan High Dam in the 1960s, which would flood many ancient Nubian sites under the waters of Lake Nasser, prompted emergency archaeological work that dramatically expanded knowledge of the region's past. Today, museums around the world display stunning artifacts that testify to Nubia's sophistication. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston holds one of the largest collections of Nubian artifacts outside Africa, including magnificent jewellery, sculpture, and pottery from the 25th dynasty period. The British Museum houses the famous Shabaka stone with its crucial theological text. In Khartoum, the National Museum of Sudan showcases spectacular finds from royal tombs and temples. But perhaps the most powerful testimony to the Kushite achievement remains the monuments they left behind. Despite millennia of weathering, looting, and deliberate destruction, the pyramids of El Kuru, Nuri, and Meroe still stand in the Sudanese desert. The columns erected by Taharqa still reach toward the sky at Karnak. The temple complexes at Jebel Barkal still inspire awe at the foot of the sacred mountain. These physical remnants tell us much about the Kushite kingdom and its 25th dynasty of black pharaohs. Let's explore what makes their legacy so significant for our understanding of ancient history and African civilization. First, the 25th dynasty represents a unique moment when the traditional power dynamic between Egypt and Nubia was reversed. For most of their shared history, Egypt had been the dominant power, sometimes ruling Nubian territories as a colonial overlord. The rise of Kushite kings who conquered and ruled Egypt as pharaohs demonstrates that African political power was not static but fluid, with different centers of influence rising and falling over time. Second, the Kushite period demonstrates sophisticated cultural exchange rather than simple domination. The Nubian pharaohs didn't attempt to erase Egyptian culture and replace it with their own. Instead, they portrayed themselves as champions of traditional Egyptian religious practices, restoring temples and reviving ancient rituals. They adopted elements of Egyptian royal iconography while maintaining distinctive Nubian features in their self-representation. This cultural synthesis is particularly evident in art and architecture. Kushite royal statuary combines Egyptian poses and symbolism with distinctively Nubian features, broader faces, fuller lips, and different crown types. Temple architecture incorporates Egyptian elements like pylons and hypo-style halls, but with proportions and decorative details that mark them as Kushite creations. The ram-headed sphinxes that line the approaches to Kushite temples represent Amun, the deity central to both Egyptian and Nubian religion, but their stocky proportions and distinctive decorative elements are uniquely Nubian. This wasn't simple imitation, but creative adaptation, blending traditions to create something new. Third, the religious policies of the 25th dynasty had lasting impact on Egyptian theology. The Kushite pharaohs' emphasis on traditional worship, particularly their focus on Amun and the Theban theological system, helped preserve ancient religious texts and practices that might otherwise have been lost during Egypt's politically fragmented Third Intermediate period. The famous Shabaka stone, commissioned by the second Kushite pharaoh, preserves the only known copy of the Memphite theology, a crucial text for understanding ancient Egyptian conceptions of creation. By having this text carved in stone, Shabaka ensured its survival for over 2,500 years, providing modern scholars with invaluable insights into Egyptian religious thought. Fourth, the practical achievements of the Kushite rulers, particularly Taharqa, improved daily life for ordinary people. Beyond monumental buildings, they constructed and repaired irrigation systems, dug wells, and built grain storage facilities. These practical works increased agricultural productivity and improved water management, directly benefiting communities throughout Egypt and Nubia. Fifth, the Kushite period saw important technological innovations, particularly in metallurgy, while the 25th dynasty itself preceded the height of Nubian iron production, which flourished later at Meroe. It laid the groundwork for these developments by strengthening the kingdom's economic and political foundations. The later Kushite mastery of ironworking, with hundreds of smelting furnaces producing tools and weapons, represents one of Africa's most significant technological achievements. Sixth, the international relations of the 25th dynasty demonstrate Nubia's integration into a broader world system. Diplomatic and military interactions with Assyria, Judah, and other Near Eastern powers show that Kush was a recognized player on the international stage, engaging in the complex politics of the ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern world. The biblical mention of Tirhaka, king of Ethiopia, Taharqa, coming to Judah's aid against Assyria isn't just a religious reference, but evidence of real political and military alliances that shaped the history of the entire region. Far from being isolated, Nubia under the 25th dynasty was connected to a vast network of trade, diplomacy, and sometimes conflict that spanned from Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean and deep into Africa. Seventh, and perhaps most fundamentally, the story of the Black Pharaohs forces us to reconsider traditional narratives about ancient Africa, the sophisticated state organization, monumental architecture, complex religious institutions, and international diplomacy of Kushite Nubia contradict colonial-era characterizations of pre-colonial Africa as lacking significant political development or cultural achievement. The recognition of Nubia's achievements doesn't depend on comparing it to Egypt or other non-African civilizations. Kush was remarkable on its own terms, with a history spanning over 2,000 years, longer than Rome's empire existed. Its distinctive artistic traditions, architectural innovations, and technological developments represent major contributions to human cultural heritage. What makes the 25th dynasty particularly significant is how it embodies the complex relationship between two of Africa's greatest ancient civilizations. Rather than seeing Egypt and Nubia as entirely separate entities or portraying Nubia as merely peripheral to Egypt, the period of Kushite rule demonstrates their deep interconnection and mutual influence. So what happened to this remarkable kingdom after the end of the 25th dynasty? Though driven from Egypt by the Assyrians around 656 BCE, the kingdom of Kush continued to flourish in its Nubian homeland for nearly a millennium more. The royal capital eventually shifted from Napata to Meroe, further south along the Nile, where iron production became a major economic activity. During this Meroitic period, the kingdom maintained many cultural elements established during the 25th dynasty: pyramid burials for rulers, worship of Amun alongside indigenous deities like the lion god Apedamak, and an artistic tradition that blended Egyptian and Nubian elements. The Meroitic script, derived from Egyptian hieroglyphics but representing the Kushite language, came into full use during this period. Kushite queens, holding the title Kandake, often rendered as Candace in Greek and Roman sources, gained particular prominence during the later Meroitic period. These powerful women sometimes ruled independently rather than as consorts, leading armies and conducting diplomacy with other powers. One such queen famously negotiated with Augustus Caesar's representatives around 21 BCE, securing favourable terms after military confrontations. The kingdom finally declined in the 4th century CE, weakened by changing trade patterns, environmental degradation from intensive iron production, and pressure from the rising kingdom of Aksum in what is now Ethiopia. Yet even after Kush's political collapse, its cultural influence persisted in the successor Christian kingdoms that emerged in Nubia, which maintained distinctive artistic traditions and architecture influenced by their Kushite heritage. When we look at the broader legacy of the Nubian 25th dynasty and the Kushite civilization it represented, several insights emerge that remain relevant today. First, the story of the Black Pharaohs reminds us that history is rarely simple or linear. Power shifts, cultures blend, and innovations emerge from unexpected places. The traditional narrative of Egypt as the dominant civilization and Nubia as its peripheral neighbour overlooks the complex reality of their relationship, which included periods of Nubian dominance and significant Nubian contributions to shared cultural developments. Second, the rediscovery of Nubia's achievements demonstrates how historical narratives can be shaped by modern prejudices and political agendas. The minimization of Kushite contributions in earlier Western scholarship wasn't accidental, but reflected colonial-era racial theories that were uncomfortable with evidence of sophisticated African civilizations. Recognizing these biases helps us approach historical questions with greater awareness of our own potential blind spots. Third, the cultural synthesis practiced by the Kushite pharaohs offers a model of engagement that neither rejects outside influences nor abandons indigenous traditions. The 25th dynasty rulers adopted elements of Egyptian culture that served their purposes while maintaining distinctly Nubian features in their self-representation and governance. This selective adaptation allowed them to function effectively within Egyptian contexts while preserving their own cultural identity. Fourth, the 25th dynasty's emphasis on restoration and preservation, rebuilding temples, documenting ancient texts, reviving traditional practices, demonstrates an awareness of history's value that resonates with modern concerns about cultural heritage. By consciously positioning themselves as protectors of tradition, the Nubian pharaohs not only legitimized their rule, but also ensured the transmission of knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Fifth, the practical achievements of rulers like Taharqa remind us that even in societies where kings claimed divine status, effective governance often depended on addressing ordinary people's material needs. The irrigation works, wells, and grain storage facilities constructed during the 25th dynasty probably did more to secure popular support than grand theological claims or monumental architecture. Finally, the story of the Black Pharaohs contributes to a more accurate and nuanced understanding of Africa's pre-colonial past. Rather than treating the continent as a blank space awaiting European discovery or assuming the significant developments must have come from outside, recognition of Nubia's achievements helps restore agency and complexity to African historical narratives. The pyramids rising from the Sudanese desert, the colossal statues of Kushite kings, the temples with their ram-headed sphinxes. These aren't curiosities or footnotes to Egyptian history, but monuments to one of the world's great ancient civilizations. The fact that this history was obscured for so long says more about modern prejudices than about Nubia's actual significance. Today, archaeological work continues in Sudan, with new discoveries regularly expanding our understanding of Kushite civilization. Advanced techniques like satellite imaging, geophysical surveys, and DNA analysis are providing fresh insights into questions that have puzzled researchers for generations. Each finding adds detail to the picture of this remarkable African kingdom and its dynasty of Black Pharaohs. For the people of modern Sudan, this ancient heritage represents an important connection to their past. Despite political difficulties that have sometimes complicated archaeological work and site preservation, many Sudanese take immense pride in their country's role as the homeland of this sophisticated civilization. The pyramids of Meroe appear on Sudanese currency and in tourist promotions, symbols of national identity and historical achievement. In Egypt, too, there's growing recognition of the Kushite contribution to the country's long history. The 25th dynasty is now properly included in exhibitions and educational materials about Egypt's pharaonic past, acknowledged as a period of religious revival and cultural flourishing rather than dismissed as a foreign interruption. For the broader world, the story of the Black Pharaoh offers an important correction to simplified narratives about ancient history. It demonstrates Africa's central role in early civilization, reveals the complexity of cross-cultural interactions in the ancient world, and provides a reminder that power and influence have never been confined to a single region or people. As we conclude our journey through the world of the Nubian Black Pharaohs, perhaps the most important takeaway is simply appreciation for human creativity and resilience across time and